All right. So today we'll be going over part two of the appraisal process. This is actually a new presentation, never been shown before. As you know, some of the other presentations I put together, I've been doing them actually for the past 4 or 5 years and shared those numerous times. But this is a new one that I put together mainly because one of the agents kind of not begging me, but asking me to make one because he was having some problems coming up with sales and how appraisers come up with their values. So some of you were on last week. Let me start by saying that today's September 9th of 2021 and 6 o'clock on a Wednesday. And this will be part two, like I mentioned before. Last week, although we'll be doing a little bit of recap today, we did cover some of the appraisal processes. One of the biggest nuggets I think that we shared last week was undue stimulus, which is part of the definition of market value, which is typically what we're looking for in an appraisal. It is the type of value that appraisers are trying to determine, and this is primarily what lenders look for. So the wording in definition of market value, the main word there's undue stimulus, and mainly because we're not using any information that has undue stimulus. And so that was anybody who missed it. I'll be putting up the YouTube channel for all of the presentations that have been recorded up to now, and probably there's I want to say there's 10 of them so far. Pretty soon, I just have to put the proper bumpers on the videos. They're disclaimers that, I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving legal advice, but I am, trying to share good information. So I got to put that up before I put the channel up, and that'll allow you guys to go back and recap any of the shows, or I'm sorry, not the shows, but the presentations that have been previously played, and or maybe you missed one or two of them and you want to take a look at them. So those will be up pretty soon. So let's get started. 6:04. There's always the latecomers, but can't really wait for them because today there's 20 slides and there's actually a lot of information here. You guys are, like I said, feel free to take pictures if you want of some of these slides, but there is a really good slide in here that it took me a long time to put together, mainly because of the animation formatting, because I wanted to illustrate something, and you guys will see it today. So I'm really excited about getting this out to you guys because it's good stuff. So just real quick, you guys, I will meet you on my side, but feel free to chime in. I definitely do not like doing a monologue. I definitely like a dialogue. So if you guys want to chime in and, question, comment, whatever it is, but do me a favor when you're done, mute on your side. If not, I'll mute you on my side. It's just the background noise, dogs, cats, trucks, that kind of thing. Sometimes create a distraction. So just a reminder for that. If you like, you can use the chat room. If you're kind of shy and you don't want to unmute, you can always use the chat room. I'll try to get to your questions at the end of each slide, okay? And then thank you guys for logging in early. I do like to try and get started by 6 o'clock, but it just seems like, folks log in as late as 6:15 sometimes. I don't like to hold it up because I don't like to go in like super late into the evening. We can actually hold these meetings anytime. And actually, you guys were the ones who tell me, hey, Alex, you know what, can we do 6 o'clock on a certain day or whatever? And that's how we kind of ended up on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. So if you guys have any suggestions or what have you, there's always newcomers and there's always folks that have already seen everything, so they're not coming on anymore. Things can change, okay? So all you gotta do is make that request, okay? And as always, feel free to invite anybody that you feel will benefit from these. And obviously, when I get the channel up, they can look at all of that stuff on their leisure on YouTube, which is kind of nice. And for the most part, at their own pace, because I know right now we're doing one a week, which is roughly an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours sometimes, sometimes an hour, just depends. That we have all the presentations, and if somebody, you know, if there's, let's say there's 50 presentations, if somebody wants to digest that in 3 months, I guess they could, right? And there's, you know, there's obviously also recap, you know, so you can always recap on that stuff. So anyway, any questions or comments before we get started? So really quick, we'll do a quick overview of the what we kind of talked about last week, what an appraisal is, right? Types of value, definition of market value, I mentioned that earlier, market value versus market price. What does an appraiser do? You know, what they actually do. Okay, yeah, Dion, you have a question. When's the channel coming? I'm hoping to get the channel up, I would say by the end of August. I'm sorry, end of August, end of September, I'm hoping. It may be a little bit later, mainly because, like I said, there's some setup that goes along with it. And the setup, it might take some time, especially because there's so many videos. So once I get that set up and I get it rolling, that's when I'll share the channel, okay? So I apologize for the delay. I really had no plans to do that, but I changed my mind. So that was just, you know, I probably would be a lot farther ahead if I would have done it, you know, 6 months ago. You know, easily would have had an additional 25, you know, different presentations recorded, but that didn't happen. So, you know, got a late start. That's okay. It'll just coax me to keep going on with, you know, additional ones. Some of the stuff that we haven't seen. I know Dion, you were, or it might have been the other gentleman. You guys were asking to go the RPA stuff, and that's six different sessions, right? So, so that said, I appreciate your patience with that. Okay. So we last week we went over limiting conditions, and then on part 2, which is today, we'll be going over analysis, the actual inspection, and comparables, and that's what everybody's been waiting for. That is actually the part that took me a long time to put together, but at the end of the day, man, it came out really nice. So I'm excited about showing it to you guys today. The certification, which primarily is an appraiser's certifying, you know, what it is that they're doing, and the fact that there is a science to appraisal that they're following. So they're certifying a lot of things on the report, right? Licensing, obviously you have to be licensed federally speaking to determine a value on a report, especially on a Fannie Mae report or Freddie Mac report, which is the 1004 form, and that's the form that you see right there on the right. But in order to do that, in order to use that report, right, we'll be talking about that today, you have to be licensed. Okay, and like I said, there's people still logging in. Good to see you guys. So, and then finally there's compliance, and we'll cover a little part of that. And then next week, part 3, we'll do a live demonstration. I'll show you guys how to do a BPO or broker price opinion, as well as a CMA report on MLS. So the BPO is actually done on Realist, which is a public record system. And the CMA, which is a comparative market analysis, the MLS system has a way to print it out, so where it's understandable, and it actually is using statistics now to arrive at not a conclusion, but more of an indicator. Okay, so that'll be next week. So you guys that are on today, don't miss next week, because that's going to be a good one, and it's going to be a little bit more hands-on. Okay. So any questions or comments? Dion was saying that you're excited to preview when it's done. Yeah, no, Dion, that's why I'm getting it up. like I said, feel free to share with your colleagues, your comrades, any of that information, because a lot of folks don't come on this particular Zoom meeting because they have other obligations. They have other things going on, and they tell me, oh, you know what, I couldn't get on because of this or that, right? So that said, that channel, when I get it up, it definitely will be somewhat of an advantage to those who want to see this information. So let's start with analysis. All right, so this is on every appraisal, and this is simply a snip of an appraisal report. Okay, the scope of work uses the word a few times, right? In order to properly analyze, one must have a subject to inspect, hence the word inspect numerous times. And you'll see it here a bunch of times: inspect the neighborhood, inspect each of the comparables, right? It says it a bunch of times. So it takes practice and an educated eye to properly analyze the information needed for a thorough report. It becomes the opinion of the appraiser as to what is best to use in the report, and the conclusion is the residual effect. So this is important because last week we talked about the definition of market value, okay? And I told you that, I used to get in conversations, because I was an appraiser for a good 20 years. And, we'd be at a party or something, and the first thing people ask you is, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I'm an appraiser. The first thing they ask me is, hey, what do you think my house is worth, right? And then we get into that conversation. Well, how am I supposed to know what your house is worth without doing research on it? I have to research it. I have to inspect the property. There's so much I have to do, right? And so this scope of work talks about what it is that I'm looking at, right? And the biggest thing here, and I think I highlighted, let me take a look here real quick. So there's the word inspection. Okay, visual inspection, right? There's inspect there, each of the comparables, right? And research, right? Analyze, right? The data. But this is the biggest part here, right here: analysis, opinions, and conclusions. And actually, let me back up here because I thought I highlighted that section. Right here where it says report his or her analysis, opinions, and conclusions. So I've heard brokers say, hey, Alex, an appraiser is just an opinion. An appraisal is just an opinion of value, right? And I would disagree wholeheartedly. It's not just an opinion of value. It's an opinion of all the things that we're seeing here. That opinion is a correlation of the analysis, which hence gives the conclusion. And this is where I say here on the last sentence that it's the residual effect. So what I'm doing is I'm gathering information, okay? And the residual effect is the value that comes out of it. So it has nothing to do really with my opinion. My opinion comes in when I'm inspecting the neighborhood, I'm inspecting the comparables, and I'm analyzing the subject property. That's where my opinion comes in as to whether or not I should be using something. So we talked about undue stimulus last week. Would I be using a comparable sale that was sold to an investor that is $150,000 under everything else in the area? And the answer would be no. But I would have to use my opinion, obviously, to say, oh, no, I can't use that because my research is telling me that property sold for a lot less than everything else in the area. So really, it has undue stimulus. I shouldn't be using it. So that's where my opinion comes in, okay, and my analysis. But when I correlate all that information together, I come up with a conclusion, and that's the residual effect. So it's never my opinion. The value that comes on an appraisal for an appraiser is never my opinion of value. My opinion comes in with the analysis and the research and the inspection. That's where my opinion comes in. Never comes in with the value. So it's too simplistic for a broker to say, oh, an appraisal is just an opinion of value. It's too simplistic because there's so much more that goes into it. I remember when I started doing appraisals were 2 pages. Right now, they're probably more like 35 pages. So you can imagine how much information goes into that. So that said, like I said, this is simply a snip of an appraisal. if you pull any appraisal that's ever been done on any of the properties that you guys have closed, this will be in there. Okay. So last week we talked about the definition of market value. This week we're talking about the scope of which an appraiser is operating, right? Any questions or comments on that? All right, well, let's keep moving. I hope I haven't thoroughly confused you, but that's important to understand because you may have had an opinion about that before, mainly because nobody's ever really asked. You know, a broker will simply say, "Oh no, it's an opinion of value," and when I try to explain it to them, their eyes kind of glaze over because they're not understanding what I'm saying, nor do they care. All they care about is the paycheck at the end of the day. So anyway, let's start with let's continue on with the inspection and the recap, okay? So last session, we spoke about the physical inspection of the subject property. Appraisers verify size, utility, amenity, layout, and condition, right? We talked about all those things, right? Size includes living area determined by habitable living space. So when we talk about living area, can we include an enclosed patio in the living area of a property so we can compare to? And the answer would be no, for different reasons. The county and usually the municipal and or the state, okay, they have their guidelines in terms of health and safety and what is habitable living space. What can you actually live in? So there are 5 tests to that, okay? And I won't go over that right now, but just understand that there are 5 tests to habitable living space. Lot size is determined by plat map, lot dimensions provided by survey. Utility, meaning number of bedrooms, bathrooms, dens, living rooms, kitchens. Amenity, meaning pools, patios, car storage, etc. Layout, taking into consideration its function and ease. Condition, of course, refers to deferred maintenance, repairs needed, and or cost to cure. Now, something I should have added here is also something that's in good condition, right? Completely remodeled or even new, right? That's also a condition. These are all things that an appraiser inspects. We kind of went over this a little bit last week, but I wanted to go over it again because it kind of goes along with the appraiser scope of what we talked about in the last slide. The physical inspection is rather involved, but everyone, without really thinking of it, are making judgments of these things normally and putting a price tag on it. And that's true, okay? We all walk into a property and we're making these judgment calls. Maybe we haven't defined it like we have here in terms of size, lot size, utility, amenity, layout, condition. We're not thinking of it that way, right? But what we're doing is we're judging these things now in our mind, with or without the training of an appraiser. So Celia has a question. How much an ADU adds to the value? Celia, that is a loaded question. Okay, it kind of relates to what we talked about earlier. You have something that is superficial to a property that will add value or sometimes take away. So because that's not the subject matter right now, I apologize. I can't answer your question because it would take way too long. But you and I can talk about it on a one-on-one. Mainly because there's not a general answer to your question, okay? It depends on the property, it depends on the area, it depends on the size of the ADU, it depends on whether the ADU is permitted. There's so many variables going on there that it's too much to discuss right now in class, so I apologize. Any other questions or comments on the inspection of a property? All right, well, let's keep moving on. So comparables. So let's start with the definition, right? Admitting of comparison with another or others. The satellite revolution is comparable to, which this is an example, Gutenberg's invention of movable type, right? Similar or equivalent, right? The word by far is the most misused in appraisal interpretation. And I don't mean by appraisers, I mean by the profession of real estate. Allow me to explain. Most people are driven by price and not similarity, as demonstrated by Webster's dictionary. The scientific principle term that appraisers use is substitution when demonstrating comparison. So the industry as a whole uses the word comparables, right? The industry as a whole uses the word comparables, but quite frankly, nobody really uses that word correctly, because if you use the word comparable, it means similar or equivalent. What most people are saying when they're saying, oh no, I need to find more comps because you're looking for a value, that has nothing to do with similarity or equivalency. Okay, so understand that appraisers are using an appraisal methodology called substitution. Okay, the appraisal principle that states when several similar or commensurate goods or services are available, the one with the lowest price will attract the greatest demand and widest distribution. So that's true about anything. Hey guys, we do this with gas. What are we always looking at when we're driving down the street? We're looking at the price of the gas that we're going to put in our car, right? And we're looking for the station that has the cheapest price. Isn't that what we do? The one with the lowest price will attract the greatest demand and widest distribution. Guess what? That's what appraisers are looking at when they're comparing the information. But that doesn't mean that they're looking for the lowest price. What it means is that that's how they gauge their bottom line. So everything is up from there, right? So I wanted to explain that because that could be a little bit confusing, right? But understand that appraisers are using a principle, an appraisal principle called substitution. It's the theory of substitution. So question, how does the condition of the property affect the value? Well, I mentioned this in the previous slide, that even though you may not have appraisal training, you may not even have real estate training, everyone, including kids, okay, will go into a property and they will comment on the condition of it. So what does it do? Well, it affects its worth. So how does the condition of the property affect the value? Well, it affects it in terms of the meeting of the minds. We talked about the buyer and seller actually set market price, right? That is the price of the property. And obviously the buyer is looking at the condition of the property, and that has affected his decision. Now, I understand your question mainly because I know where you're coming from. That may not be the answer you were looking for. You want a number. Hey, Alex, you know what? Oh yeah, it affects it $10,000. No, see, that's not how appraisers appraise property. We appraise property based on the actions and attitudes of buyer and seller in an area, and each area is different, and the property owners are different. So that's what we're gauging. It kind of reverts back to what we're talking about here in terms of substitution. It is a theory based in science. So I'm not trying to make you guys appraisers, but I'm trying to help you understand that we can't just put numbers on things and expect a conclusion to pop out, because that's not how appraisers do appraisals. And this is where the demonstration, and I'm kind of glad you asked that question. This is where the demonstration really sticks out, because I'm going to show you guys, okay, because we're all going to unmute, and I need you guys to chime in here, okay, when we get to that part. But remember that the word comparable means similar or equivalent. It doesn't mean that we're looking for another value. Oh, I need more comps, right? That's not what that means. I know that's how we all use it, okay? That's how I got somebody yesterday that, hey, Alex, I need comps for this property because this appraiser's crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And when I looked at it, he wasn't crazy. He just picked the right ones. So I understand the question, but I need you to understand that it's not that simple. So, okay, here's an example. Oh, okay, well, this is the example. Okay, so I need you guys to do me a favor on this one, okay? I need you guys to unmute, okay? And try to keep it down so we're not overlapping each other. So if you guys can do me a favor and unmute, because I need you guys' feedback on this slide. Celia, thank you. Lupe, can you guys unmute? Thank you.
Yes.
Larry, thank you. Celia, thank you. Dion, can you unmute?
I what?
Alrighty, thank you. Melissa. And then Ron, if you can unmute, please. Unless you guys got music playing or something, and let's not get crazy. Okay.
Well, muted.
But here's a quick example. Okay, you guys can hear me okay, right?
We have to use the
Yes.
Okay. So here's an example of what we normally see on an analysis when we are, let's say we're on Real List and we're pulling up information, okay? So here's our subject property, right? Our location is typically a bullseye, right? So kind of like, you know, we see a property on a map, and that's our bullseye. And typically we're trying to go a mile around the property. We don't want to pierce that balloon, if you will, of that 1 mile, because we want to stay locationally, we want to stay close. That's just an appraisal guideline, if you will. Okay. So our subject property is 1290 square feet. It's 50 years old, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And
What is good for that? 2 space.
what I want you guys to tell me as I start putting up the criteria is what this property's worth. Okay. And then I'm going to show you guys what normally happens with real estate agents, okay, versus appraisers. And this is why I really like this slide, because it's cool. It's really cool to watch this happen. So again, our location is a bullseye. We're 1290 square feet. We're 50 years old, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, right? So here's the first set of criteria. Here's our addresses.
It just happened.
What's our property worth?
Yeah, but from
Anybody?
We don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know what our property is worth, right? But if we knew the area, like say 354 Broadway, the second one, if we knew the area, we could kind of tell, oh, you know, I know Broadway, 1,300 square feet. Oh yeah, you know, it's this, right? Because we're already kind of opinionated about that, right? Okay,
Correct.
so let's go with this. Okay, there's your next set of criteria. Okay,
It's about.
what's our property worth?
I will say 375, 360.
650,000.
1,290, 50 years, 3.
So Lupe, you said 375?
Yes.
Okay, and then
I would
somebody
say
else, is that,
425 because the price is right now.
okay, well, we're not, don't
That's
think
what
this-
the market is saying. That's,
Yeah, don't-
I'm
don't
just
think
going
of-
by the market.
yeah, don't think of that right now, like the market, but think of this as simply an analysis that's being done just at any time. Let's just say that right now the market conditions are stable, right? They're not crazy. But what is our subject property worth?
425.
Well, I think we'd have to find out if these meet the criteria for substitution first, right?
Okay, so Dion, you're hitting it right on the nail on the head, dude, because that's ultimately what appraisers do. Okay, but guess what? Right now, looking at this right now, every realtor in the room is saying 425. And that's because that's the highest one on the grid. They're not even looking at the other criteria, right? So what you said, right, is that's how an appraiser is going to be looking at it in terms of substitution. But a realtor is saying, oh no, or let's forget about realtors. The seller of the property is looking at, oh no, there's one that sold for 425 in the area, so that must be correct.
Yes.
You follow me so far?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. So here is the distance of these properties to the subject property.
So
location-
Broadway would not be a comp.
Exactly, because it's outside of our mile bubble, right? So we've
Yeah.
kind of eliminated that one from our analysis, right?
Mhm.
Happens to be one of the higher ones, a 395, actually the second to the highest one. So actually what that's doing is it's kind of killing our 425 because it's kind of an anomaly now, right? Maybe we talked about undue stimulus, right?
Yes.
So what's our property worth? Earlier,
Right now, without taking that 349, the 395?
yeah, so you kind of eliminated that one because it's kind of out of our bubble or mile bubble, right? Because we have closer comps, we have closer sales, right?
So I say 375.
So,
That's
so,
the
okay,
highest.
so Loop is still on 375. But
But we
anyone
still
else?
need the square footage and we still need the age and we still need the bedrooms and the bath.
Yeah, which are coming up. But anyone else want to take a stab at a value here?
395.
395?
Yes.
Yeah, 395.
Okay, well, that one is already kind of been eliminated because of the location. It's outside of a mile. So
Mhm,
it really doesn't meet the criteria that we're looking for in
mhm.
substitution. So let me ask you this, okay? And again, this is normal for real estate agents, okay? The reason why
Yes.
it's at 395 is because it's a second to the highest, but it's eliminated. We're not using it anymore because of its location, okay? But look at the other ones, 360, 342, 365, 375, and 357. That's now the predominant in the area. So realistically, it's probably more like 365. Right now, just looking at this, right?
Well, if we're averaging these out, then we're closer to like the 370 mark.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there is something called mean, median, and mode, right? And if you're averaging, it would be the mode, right?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, the mean. The mean is the average. So that is statistics, right? But that's not what appraisers do. They don't average, but they do something called correlation, which in a way, Dion, that's kind of what you did. So if you think about it, but not far from a true look at this information. So let's move on to the next one, okay? So now we've added age. So can you see why now number 2, the one on Broadway, really isn't a comparable? It's too far away
It's too far and it's too new.
and it's new. It's 25 years newer than the subject property, right?
Mhm.
So there's kind of a reason why it's sold for 395 versus the other ones, right? So what's our property worth?
And this one wouldn't be because
Yeah.
64.
It's 60. The other one, 50 years, is at 365.
And then this one on beach is
Yeah.
65. So I would-
365.
365, I would say.
Okay, so now it kind of changed your mind, didn't it? It kind of moved you to realize, hey, what's going on here, right? So let's go on to the next one. What's our property worth?
Oops,
365.
okay.
We're starting to pinpoint it now, right?
Mhm.
But do you guys see the transition that was made when we backed out the age and the bedroom count?
Yes.
Our values were higher, okay? Automatically, I mean, we were even getting results at 395, and it's because our eye is trained to go to the highest number. But that's not how appraisers look at things, because realistically, what they're not looking at is all the rest of the information and not the values of the properties. Not until you have that information. That's why it's called the residual effect. So let's move on to the next criteria. Do you guys see now why number 3 sold for 425?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath.
Yeah.
So it has to do with utility, right?
Yes,
Is that comparable to our subject property?
No.
no,
We're kind of kicking it out, right? So
yes,
realistically, comp 2 and 3 are not viable sales. Hence the word comparable, they are not comparable. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
yes.
All right,
Yes.
here's the real kicker. You ready for this one? What's our property worth?
Square footage, it's 112 and the other one is 112, right there. Yeah, 365.
6. Yeah.
That correlating the information, we have a few highs, we have a few lows, but in reality it's 365. Guess what you guys just did? You guys just appraised this property, which I would venture to say those of you who have tried to come up with a value before have never done it this way.
You have.
What you were looking at was the values. And so what I'm trying to do is not criticize you, obviously. I'm simply showing you what an appraiser does.
Yes,
Alex, would
Thank you.
the close date also matter?
Okay, yeah, so we're just assuming that these all closed within the past 6 months. I didn't feel the need to put in the date, mainly because that was just something that was an assumption. It's assumed that these are all within the same time frame.
So typically you want to go about 6 months back.
You want to try to stay as close to the present time as possible. And if you have to continue to go back in time, then you can. There's something called an extended search. And let's say that you don't have 3 sales that have happened in the past 6 months. You can use one that's 7 months or 8 months, but only if there isn't any other ones. Because if there are other sales that you're ignoring, your analysis now becomes flawed. But again, what I'm trying to illustrate here is what an appraiser is doing. You guys just did that. You literally just did that. And that's what's so exciting about this slide, because trying to explain why this property isn't worth 395, if you look at this slide, okay? Because most sellers would disagree with you. Oh no, my house is worth more than 395, looking at this information. But we all just pretty much agree there's worth more like 365. Or it's actually, what we're doing is the most probable selling price. Does that make sense?
yes.
So good, that was a good demonstration. Guys, any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, let me ask you a question on that, Alex.
Yes, sir.
If right now you have a lot of subject properties to compare it to, let's say you only had 2 and 3 were the only things that were available. Are you going to go back and subtract for values of bedrooms and baths at that point?
Then it becomes a matter of more analysis as to what those things like
Word.
age, bedroom and
Yeah.
bathroom count are applying to value so we can subtract it. Now,
Okay.
my analysis is now going to be a little bit more skewed because now it's becoming more my opinion and in terms of my analysis versus actual information.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah, what's
What
up?
happens if you have, let's say, 3 bedrooms legally, but then you become the 3 bedrooms into 2 bedrooms instead of 3, because they were kind of small and you make
If
it.
original was 3 bedrooms and you reduce it to 2 bedrooms,
Yes. So what kind of comparables are you going to use? 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms?
Well, okay,
True.
so you're talking about if you're trying to analyze the subject property and it's been downsized.
Yes.
Yeah, so realistically, you would be comparing to a 2 bedroom. So that would be sale number 6 here. And see what happened to the value?
Okay. Okay.
Because in other words,
because the other bedroom
we-
is not there anymore.
you remove a wall, right? You remove a wall and now you have a bigger bedroom, right? So now you only have 2 bedrooms versus 3. And
Okay.
I've seen that happen before. You've diminished the utility of the property, and 2-bedroom homes are much harder to sell than 3-bedroom homes.
Yeah.
Any realtor knows that. So what happens to the worth of the property? It reduces the worth of the property.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
it kind of goes along with Dion's question before in terms of condition. It's the same concept. If the condition of the property is not to standard, it's going to affect the value of the property. I just can't plug a number into it. Because that's the last part of your question, is how does it affect the value? That question really needs to be analyzed. It's not a knee-jerk answer that I can just, shoot off the hip and say, oh yeah, no, it's 10,000. No, there's no way to know that, because you would have to analyze an area. And it would also depend on what's called cost to cure, of what it's going to cost to cure that condition. It's the same thing with the bedroom. You can replace that wall and still make it a 3-bedroom house. So the effect on this property just happened to be $18,000. Oh no, I'm sorry. It's 23,000, right? So if I replace that wall and let's say it takes me $3,000 to do it, I just increased the value by 23 grand. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this demonstration here is important because it will help you visualize, because you all did it, okay, what an appraiser is doing, how they come up with their value. This is why we think appraisers are crazy, because they're not looking at, oh, look, there's one that sold for 425, and there's another one that sold for 395, and there's another one that sold for 375. Yeah, but the one for 375 is 200 square feet bigger than our subject, right? They're not looking at the characteristics of the property. They're looking at the prices.
Of the replacement of equal, right?
Well, it's what we talked about earlier. The word comparable is similar or equivalent.
Yeah.
So we want
Similar or equivalent.
we want to try and stay as similar as possible. Well, guess what? Comps 5 and comps 2 are most similar, but comp 2 just happens to be 1.25 miles away. Comp 3 is the least similar at 17, almost 1,800 square feet. That's not even a comparable.
Yeah.
That's not comparable. The word comparable does not apply to that sale. So that's why we can't use it. But when we're looking at an analysis, we're looking at the numbers and we're saying, oh my God, this thing's worth 425, right? So any other questions or comments on that?
For this,
I have a question.
Yeah, what's
The square footage of the lot, is that in a issue there or no?
I didn't include it in this example, but yes, it could be.
It could be, okay.
Yeah, so in other words, you can continue to add things here: fireplace, pool, air conditioning.
Oh, okay, got
right?
it, got
All
it.
of these other things, and it will simply start swaying your decision as to what number you're going to kind of hang your hat on, right?
Correct.
Even though an appraiser doesn't hang his hat on one sale, it's a correlation of the information. So we have number 7 on Idaho is very similar at 360. Number 5 is very similar at 365, right? And then we have number 1 on Maine at 357. So the
I have a
correlation
question.
of that information would mean that the property is worth about 360.
So the main things that you start with is the address, the location, the square footage, age, bedrooms, bath, correct? That's the beginning.
Lupe, were you in last week's session?
No, I was not. I was.
Okay, there was a section there that shows page 2 of the appraisal that has the comparable sales on it. And there is on the appraisal form, the form was designed in terms of importance. So the very first thing is the address, the next thing is the price, the next thing is location, the next thing is the date it was sold, and so on and so forth. If you look at the appraisal, that, to answer your question, that is the chain in which an appraiser is looking at the level of importance.
Okay.
And usually the last thing I think is like fireplace or something, right? Because it costs a lot of money and it doesn't affect the value that much, especially here in Southern California. Now, if we were in Chicago, it might be a little different. But I think I highlighted some values here in terms of what are the actual comparable sales here. Those are the 3 there. In terms of age, size, utility, and location. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay. obviously, there, I illustrated the 375 as being what's called the upper bracket. And let me back up there for a second because I forgot that I had done that. So there's something in appraisal that says, and this is actually just in anything, it can't be worth more than what you can buy it for. So let that sink in for a second. It cannot be worth more than what you can buy it for. So if I can buy something for 365, it can't be worth 375 because I just bought it for 365. Does that make sense? So in appraisal,
Yeah.
underwriters will talk to you about bracketing. Okay, you might hear this from an underwriter. They'll say, well, you didn't bracket your comparables. And what they're trying to say is that what's your upper bracket? Well, my upper bracket here, a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, almost 1,500 square feet, sold for 375. So obviously, if my house is inferior to that in size, in age, and in bedroom bathroom count, obviously it can't be worth more than that. Does that make sense? So that sets my upper bracket, right? And then it can't be worth less than comp 6, which is 342 because it's smaller and has less utility. So it can't be worth less than that. So now I've created my bracket. My bracket is 342. My lower bracket is 342. My upper bracket is 375. So it's going to be in between there somewhere, right? That's how you create what's called a bracket. So it's got to be in between there somewhere. And guess what? I've got 3 sales that are in between there perfectly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, okay, so let's keep moving. We're barely on slide 7 and it's already coming up on 7 o'clock. Okay, so pop quiz. Why is it important for real estate professionals, and give me a second, I want to meet you guys, okay? Why is it important for real estate professionals to know a bit about determining value? Anybody?
To price the home that it will sell.
Yeah, but why is it important? Why is that important?
Know what kind of loan you can get on it.
Okay, so let's say you want to refinance, right? So that's one reason. Realtors don't normally do loans, but if you happen to have your NMLS, yeah, okay, that's one thing. What's something else? Anybody? All right, well, here are a few of my suggestions. So setting sales price. In other words, if you're listing a property for sale, right? Determining the offer price. So let's say you're representing a buyer. Determining ARV, and those of you who invest in property, it's as repaired value, ARV, to an investor. Ron had mentioned determining loan to value, right? Providing PMI, or I'm sorry, removing PMI, which was a practice some time ago, and now with FHA, new FHA guidelines, that doesn't happen too much, but removing PMI would be a reason. Determining insurable value. You know, when you go and you try and insure a property, the insurance agent is giving you a value that you could potentially dispute because now you have a little bit of knowledge on how to determine the value. Determining improvement value. So let's say you want to do an addition, or you know, Celia talked about reducing bedroom count. And then feasibility. Feasibility kind of relates more to businesses and income property, but it's still the same concept. You're still determining the value. Typically, feasibility is based on income, and so that's a little bit different, but still applies under these examples. Okay, so let's keep moving. Any questions or comments? So within the body of every appraisal report, in the general commentary, there is a section called appraiser certification. On a residential appraisal, there are 25. There are 5 more for supervising appraisers. Without getting too detailed, I will summarize. Okay, so now I'm not going to go over every single one of these. Okay, but these are the things that an appraiser is certifying, right? They're certifying their scope of work, their visual inspection, their USPAP compliance, which is an appraisal compliance, their national methods of appraising, verifying the agreement, meaning that the actual purchase agreement, they're verifying that. Research comps, you know, a lot of appraisers will ask you for the agreement and they'll ask you for sales in an area so they can research those, right? They may not be in agreement with what you pulled, but they want that information nevertheless, right? And so on and so forth. So knowledge of appraising, obviously, they have the data, use of reliable resources, adverse conditions, their own opinions, obviously, you know, they're trained, you know, different. I remember, you know, being in a room with 10 different appraisers and none of us had the same opinion about certain things. That's just how things are. Electronically signed appraisals, reliance on the appraisal, laws of distribution, and so on and so forth. Like I said, I'm not going to get into too deep in here because I'm not trying to train you guys on how to be appraisers, but understand that if you're looking for something wrong with an appraisal, right, these are the things that you're going to be looking at because they're certifying that these things are correct. So if they happen to be out of compliance on a few of these, you could potentially dispute the appraisal. And that's kind of a nugget here for what we're talking about, because that's the number one thing people will approach me for and say, hey, Alex, you know what? This value didn't come in. Can you take a look at it? Well, guess what I'm looking at? I'm not just looking at the comparables, even though that's one of them, so number 6, right? But I'm looking at other things. I'm looking at, is this guy certified? Is he licensed? Is he a trainee? Who did the inspection? How did they do the inspection? How did they determine certain things? That's what I'm looking at. And if I'm going to dispute an appraisal, I'm going to dispute them on this certification. Any questions or comments on that? So this is what that certification looks like on the appraisal form. Okay, so this is a certification, right? And we've all seen it. If anybody that's flipped through an appraisal, right? This is what it looks like. And number 7 is the one that everybody kind of hangs their hat on, and I can barely read it, but it says selected and used comparable sales that are locationally, physically, and functionally the most similar to the subject property. And everybody will sit there and say, oh no, he didn't use the right comps or whatever. But if you look at the comps, they happen to be the most similar. It has nothing to do with the price, like we mentioned before. But this is what a certification looks like on an appraisal, and every single appraisal has one. Okay. And let me see what it says. Supervising appraiser, if any, have 5 additional certificational requirements listed here. And that is these 5 here on the cutoff page in brackets. The certifying appraiser, because there's such a thing, kind of almost like a broker is to an agent. He's kind of like the appraiser's boss, if you will, that's overlooking the appraisal. They're certifying other things additionally to the rest of the certification. Any questions or comments on that? So let's do a quick funny, right? Take a breather. How I felt before the appraisal, after receiving the appraisal, and I mean, she looks happy there, so I'm assuming that there was a good conclusion, right? And Sully, you'll probably get a kick out of this one. Waiting the appraisal results, like, man, that's when you've already seen the information and you already kind of know what's about to happen, right? So you're just waiting for that thing to come in. And surprisingly enough, sometimes appraisers pull it off. You know, sometimes they're able to do that. And this one's kind of terrible, man. I won't say much about this one, but I just thought it was funny when I saw it. So the face you make waiting for that appraisal. So there it is again. Yeah, so that's kind of funny. But anyway, let's keep moving here. So we're on slide 11, coming up at 6:55. And let's see what else we got here. Licensing. Okay, so to apply for initial license, applicants must complete and submit all the following, right? They have the basic education. As of January 1st, 2017, all initial and reciprocal applicants must complete an approved state and federal laws course prior to obtaining a license, right? They use a log. That's REA 3004 that they put all that information on. There are multiple supervisors and appraisers. Each one needs to have a separate log. You need to do a life scan. We did that as real estate agents as well, and consent to service the process if the applicant physical residence is outside of California, and all appropriate fees are required, obviously. The Bureau processes applicant fingerprints via live scan for California residents. If the applicant resides outside of the state, fingerprints must be rolled and submitted on that form. So just real quick, licensing is not much different than what we see in real estate. The tests are similar. You take the test electronically. There's also, the classes that you can take for appraisal as well. But these forms now require the appraiser now to go out and get 2 years of experience before they can even submit all of that stuff to the Office of Real Estate Appraisers. So any questions or comments on that? And yeah, it was hard to read, and mainly because I didn't want to go over the whole thing. I kind of recapped on the certification part, but feel free, next time you guys see an appraisal, you happen to get an email to you or something, feel free to flip through the pages and just kind of skim through some of that stuff. Again, this is the certification is telling you what the appraiser is supposed to be doing. And if you can recognize something that the appraiser didn't do, you kind of caught them by the shirt and say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't do something here, and guess what? It's going to affect the value, right? That's the purpose of review. A reviewer, which I did for Argent Mortgage for probably a good 7 years. That's what I would be looking for. I would be looking for those mistakes, right? So the initial application, basic education, AT, which is a trainee, AL, which is just a licensee, 150 hours. AR is a certified residential for 200 hours, and then AG, which is certified general for 300 hours. And then obviously the required USPAP courses. And then the evidence of education certificates requires a degree. Now, that wasn't always so, right? Reciprocal access simply means use of your license in another state. And then the log demonstrates how much work was performed, and that log needs to be put in. The fingerprint card, obviously, and then the physical address. Kind of covered that in the last slide. Just kind of recapped on some of that. So now the reporting. So appraiser reporting is no easy task. An appraiser can literally write and report on their analysis, opinions, conclusions, illustrations, certification, insurance, statement of limiting conditions, et cetera, all in a narrative format. Now, a narrative format means you're not using a form. You're actually writing it out, kind of like on a Word document, okay? This is actually the way commercial appraisers operate in most cases, which are certified general appraisers, or AG. When you see an AG in front of their license number, that means that they're like the highest form of appraiser that you can be. But because a narrative appraisal can be written in almost any way, the conventional and government insured mortgage industry needed some conformity. So the powers that be, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, created a form report that has become the standard of most appraisal reports that we see. The Form 1004/70 has entered the stage and have, in my opinion, made the appraisal process both easier but misunderstood. So a narrative appraisal is simply written out, whereas we're used to seeing the form reports, which are a little bit more boilerplate because they're all the same, right? So a report summary of what is reported, right? And this is just things that are all reported on an appraisal report, right? The subject information, obviously, the contract information, we talked about that, the neighborhood analysis, the site analysis. Somebody asked about lot size. Does it make sense? Or does it make a difference? Yes. the actual improvements, meaning the improvements to the land, right? The comparable sales, right? All of this stuff here is stuff that appraisers are reporting on. And so you can imagine how much goes into an appraisal. I mean, does it seem now that an appraiser isn't making as much money as he should? It did to me, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I mean, this is a lot of stuff. Now, granted, the form made it a little bit easier, mainly because a lot of this stuff was already there. And sometimes you could just make changes to it. And sometimes there were minor changes, right? To make the appropriate illustration of your subject property. But some of it was not. Some of it was a little bit more complex, and you had to handle it in different ways. So these are all things that an appraiser reports on. Any questions or comments on that? So actually, we're not doing too bad now. We're on slide 16 and it's 7:02. So we're actually doing pretty good. I thought we were getting behind on time a little bit, but now let's do compliance. Okay, so I won't get too much into compliance. It's because there is an entire book, guidelines called USPAP, the Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practice, that details the ethical and performance standards for the appraisal. It was written and created by appraisers at the Appraisal Foundation and was adopted by Congress in 1989. Its purpose is to be simply have a uniform method of practice that is nationally recognized. So when you actually do an appraisal, okay, the federal government has determined what is nationally recognized. And that wasn't until 1989. So that's actually fairly recent. Because obviously there was another, 50 years of probably the appraisal profession, if not farther back, that didn't have those nationally known practices. So you can imagine the spaghetti that was happening with just people's different opinions about things, right? It is broken down into standards, statements, and advisory opinions expected by the practitioner by number. The standard of practice is clear and broken down in a manner that each section of the standard is clear and segmented. It breaks down the development and reporting requirements required to remain clear and hold a uniform standard in a report writing. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Us as realtors, when we're looking at an appraisal, there is a federally recognized method of appraising that if the appraiser isn't doing those things, we can grab them by the shirt again and say, wait a minute, you didn't do this, right? Now, obviously it would take somewhat of a trained eye, okay, I did it for 20 years. I was out in the field for 13 years. I was in the corporate world for 7 years. I did all 50 states. Somebody like myself who was doing 25 reviews a day as a standard, I have a trained eye. I don't expect you guys to know all of this, okay? But what I did want you guys to be exposed to was simply that this is how it works. This is the framework of what when you get an appraisal, now you understand what you just got, what you just paid for. And if you're in disagreement with the value, now you can go back and say that there's legitimate reasons why there's something wrong with this appraisal. And hey, I've come across them many times. Now, granted, I would say the other 50% of the time, and I'm using a percentage, there was nothing wrong with the appraisal that I could see. But the other 50% of the time there was. And it's because of some of the scope of work, because of the undue stimulus, because of the certification problems, right? And I'll point that out to the appraiser, and I'll be honest with you, when I point those things out to the appraiser, they never saw that before. They didn't even know. And it's because of their really poor training. So appraisers aren't any better than real estate agents when it comes to training. I have found very few appraisers actually know what they're doing. And it's because I was put in a position of scrutinizing. So when you're put in that position, which now you have been, because you're the guys that are going to be the ones ordering these appraisals for your clients. So now you have a little bit more power to go back and say, wait a minute, something isn't right here. Can't really put my finger on it, but at least you have been exposed to it to a certain extent. So this is the reason why I bring up compliance. Any questions or comments on that? All right, I hope you guys' eyes don't go cross-eyed already, because this is a lot of stuff. You know, it took me years to learn this stuff, and I'm trying to you know, feed it to you guys, you know, in just a few hours. Okay, but I'm proud of you guys. Let me tell you, I'm proud, because when we went over that comparable slide and you guys were unmuted, okay, I saw a little bit of a transition, okay, because you guys actually appraised that property, right? And I'm thinking, oh man, this is good, because if I would have just give this out to, you know, 3 or 4 realtors out there and say, hey, what do you think? What do you think the values? They would have said 395. So anyway, okay, so there are many other conceptual items in need of consideration, okay? These are all things that can affect the value of a property and or the reporting of an appraiser, right? And so this is why it kind of boils down into compliance. So there are many other conceptual items in need of consideration. So there's advocacy, appraiser consulting, practice, review, appraiser peers, assignments, assignment results, assumptions. The list goes on. And you'll see this in USPAP, which is the Uniform Appraisal Practice, right, that I talked about, USPAP. It covers all of these things, okay? Because these are all different types of appraisal types. The one that we focus on is on the third column, their market value, but there's something considered a mass appraisal. You can do a mass appraisal, an appraiser can do a mass appraisal, whereas he might appraise 20 properties in an area and really just put it in one report. Appraise personal property, appraise a work file, right? A hypothetical condition. Hey, if this house was 1,600 square feet, because I'm going to put a 400 square foot addition, how much would it be worth? That's a hypothetical condition. But that said, this goes along with what an appraiser should and could consider in the value of a property. Any questions or comments on that? Oh, okay, so we're actually at the end. Okay, so good, because I actually thought we were going to go a little bit longer. There was a lot to think about and talk about here. I didn't want to get too much into the theory of appraisal. You know, there was a lot there, but I did want to expose you guys to it. And it mainly because you probably didn't know any of that even existed, because we don't talk about it too much as realtors. You know, I was fortunate enough to get both training. So I got the real estate training and the appraisal training, and they are somewhat different. And there's a lot of things that are considered in appraisal that are not considered as a real estate agent. Okay. So let's get through final thoughts. Okay, so as you can see, it takes years to learn all that is involved in developing and reporting a value. It is no easy task. It requires hours of practice and supervision, as illustrated by the requirements of the state to become licensed. We didn't even touch on bank requirements and underwriters. The appraisal process, I have always heard, is an opinion of value. I say nonsense. It is a scientific, highly governed and controlled set of rules that require a higher sense of education and logic. It is a compiling of information in a uniform manner to suggest an end result without bias or prejudice. And even with all of this, you will still get different results at times with different appraisers. And that's true. We were able to cover years of appraisal know-how in just a few sections in summary. This because we are not interested in becoming appraisers, but by knowing the inner workings of an appraisal, it may in the future become a benefit of its exposure. Maybe having the ability to find mistakes or violations to the expected practice and appropriately guide your client in facilitating their transaction. And I say that because people will come to me and they say, Alex, you know what? This appraisal just doesn't seem right to me. What do you think? And I look at it and I'm finding common mistakes. And if I can point those things out and illustrate to the appraiser as to why this should have been used versus this, or this shouldn't have been used and this should have, and I'm illustrating it really with the requirements of the appraisal and then the certification in the appraisal itself, how can they argue my point? They can't. And it's because they just didn't do it right. So it wasn't that was their opinion. It just happened to be that residual effect that was affected. So you can see that even if you are analyzing an area, you can still do it incorrectly. And that becomes the opinion of the appraiser. But because appraisers are highly regulated, they can't just do whatever they want. And that's where we come in as real estate professionals. If we understand the things that they're supposed to be doing, and we understand the things that they're supposed to be looking at and how they're supposed to be looking at them, it makes it easier for us to determine whether or not we believe that their conclusion was incorrect or correct. So anyway, any questions or comments on that? All right, so let's move on here to affiliates. And oh, I forgot to animate Shamim, so she got up there first. There's Mr. Larry. I think Mr. Larry's joining us today. Liz is here in the office, ERES Mortgage, can help you with the approvals and what have you. And then there's Mr. Dave. I highly endorse his product. He is a real estate coach. He does have his weekend thing. I hope you guys have been enjoying some of that. It's good stuff. You're welcome to contact him or just join the meeting. There's the meeting ID and passcode Saturday mornings at 8:15. You're welcome, Robert Sully. Thank you guys for coming. So understand, before you guys log off, understand that next week is going to be a live demonstration. So it's not going to be a PowerPoint presentation, even though I do have some PowerPoint stuff to put up. But what I'm going to do is physically show you how to do a BPO, which is a broker price opinion, on Realist, which is public record information, and then how to do a CMA on MLS, which it's actually going to be pretty quick because there's not much to know about it because the system pretty much does it for you, but it's just the way to get to there and what to do. So anybody who's interested in that, don't miss out next week. It'll be a good class for part 3 of the appraisal process. So anyway, that said, you're welcome, Celia. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your questions. That said, was there anything else, Lupe? You have a question?
No, I was just gonna tell you, thank you for all the information that we got today. It's very important for us to know how to read the appraisals. I had one and I didn't know how to read it. So to tell you the truth, this will be very good for all real estate agents.
Yeah, and I really do think so. Now I mentioned this last week. When I started putting this presentation together, it was a lot thicker than what you see here, right? I really had to take a lot out because when I started reviewing it myself, I'm thinking, oh my God, there's way too much here. Okay, and it's mainly because I know appraisal. You know, I'm for lack of a better word, I'm an expert in appraisal, and it became just a way too scientific. So I took a lot of that out. When I was able to take a step back and look at the finished product, I liked what I saw. Now, just today, just going over it, because this is the first time I've actually presented this presentation, I'm probably going to take a little bit out of the licensing section because it was a bit redundant. So there might be a slide or two that I might change in this presentation for next year. But for the most part, it's the basic things. And the nuggets that we can take away from this is last week was the undue stimulus. The appraiser is supposed to be measuring the property. The appraiser is supposed to be, you know, taking photos and illustrating those photos correctly. They're supposed to be determining the orientation of the property, determining and researching the neighborhood, finding similar and equivalent sales, otherwise known as comparables, right? So don't just use the word comparables when you're looking for a value, because not you would be misusing the word. The stuff that we can take away from today is, you know, the appraiser certification, the appraiser certifying, a lot of those different things. I mean, there was a whole slide of stuff that they're certifying. And if you recognize that stuff, and if they happen to be making a mistake, you can potentially point it out. And it could be to the advantage of your client. Guess what? That just made you Superman. Because if that's something you can do as a real estate professional, as to call out an appraiser, that's good stuff, as far as I'm concerned. Because I've done it a bunch of times and it's a good feeling, don't get me wrong. Now, do I feel, you know, about the appraisers like, hey guys, you know what? I definitely deal with it diplomatically, right? I try not to badger the appraisers like, oh, you know what, you're an idiot. And I'm not going to say those things, okay? And I wouldn't say those things. I'm simply trying to serve my client. I have a fiduciary responsibility. So guess what? Appraisal is a licensed activity. We're not licensed to do appraisals, but we can read it. There's no reason why we can't read it and potentially interpret it. And if we're interpreting something that looks incorrect, there's no reason why we can't point it out. And with this kind of exposure to the report, and I would say that the majority of you never looked at an appraisal the way that we just looked at it right now, okay? It's going to change your attitude towards what goes on in the future. And that attitude would simply just be your increased professionalism with your clients. Hence the reason why I wanted to put this up. Hence the reason why I did this. One of the agents here in the office was bugging me to put this together. And here we have a finished product. So hopefully you guys are able to join me next week for the live presentation. Like I said, it'll be half and half. You know, there'll be a little bit of PowerPoint, but we'll get on the system. And hopefully it doesn't take too long. Like I said, doing the actual reports is actually fairly easy, but you'll see that we'll go through the process of choosing comparables as well as we're starting to kick them out. Okay, we're starting to kick them out for different reasons, and then and I'll let you guys do that to see what the conclusion is. Okay, so any other questions or comments? Thank you guys for coming. I am going to log off now. It's 7:19, so we actually did a pretty good time. And hopefully you guys will be here next week. We had a good group today. And Mr. Larry is there as well.
Thank you, sir. Good presentation.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, okay, guys, so I'll see you guys next week, okay? Unless there's something else. Okay, you guys have a good weekend, even though it's Wednesday. I'll see you guys next week.